Okay, let's talk about a smell. Not just any smell, but that very specific, unpleasant, kind of rotten egg smell you sometimes get in buildings.
Hmm.
You know, the one maybe in a hotel hallway you thought was just redone, or weirdly, like down in a supermarket parking garage?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
What if that familiar, just foul odor wasn't just, annoying, but actually a sign of something? No, something potentially harmful.
That smell is often sewer gas. And yeah, its presence. It's usually a pretty clear signal that there's a significant failure somewhere in the building's plumbing system.
A failure. Okay.
And it's a problem that's much more widespread, more persistent than a lot of people probably realize.
And that's exactly what this deep dive is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're going to unpack a recent study that really shines a light on this whole issue, this
Yeah.
widespread problem of sewer gas leakage, particularly in China, and some of the surprising, maybe even frustrating reasons behind it, based on this research.
Exactly. We're drawing insights from a specific article published in the International Journal of Construction Engineering. The authors were really looking into observed plumbing deficiencies,
Okay.
including in places you might not expect, like, as you said, recently renovated hotels.
Right. So our mission here is to take what this article tells us
Mm.
and, help you understand why this problem is so prevalent, what the real health risks are, and what this specific issue reveals about the absolutely critical importance of plumbing standards and, maybe even more crucially, their enforcement.
Yeah, the enforcement piece is key.
It's a deep dive into something pretty much invisible, but incredibly important. So let's get into it.
Okay, so the study really highlights that this sewer gas leakage, it's been a persistent public health issue in China for, well, for decades.
Decades, wow.
Yeah, and it identifies the main technical causes pretty clearly. Things like exposed sewer pipes because building codes aren't being followed, a failure to install necessary water traps, which we can get into, and issues with how toilets are installed, particularly the vertical outlet type common there.
And we're not just talking about a bad smell you just wrinkle your nose at, are we? The source material really emphasizes that these sewer gases are genuinely hazardous to human health.
Oh, absolutely. In high concentrations, yes, they can actually be fatal.
Fatal. Okay.
But even, long-term exposure to lower concentrations, that's linked to a whole range of concerning symptoms. Things like fatigue, headaches, loss of appetite, irritability, dizziness, even respiratory issues like pneumonia. Sewer gas is a complex mix, you see, but hydrogen sulfide is a key dangerous component.
Ah, hydrogen sulfide. I think I remember the article pointing at something really insidious about that one.
Yeah.
It can actually dull your sense of smell over time.
Exactly. So you might stop noticing the odor, which is worrying because the danger is definitely still there. The risks are stark, as the source notes. Above 300 parts per million, it can cause unconsciousness, and over 1,000 parts per million, it can lead to collapse.
Wow. And it settles, right?
Oh,
This is
yeah.
heavier than air,
That's right, yeah. It tends to pool in lower levels, like basements, ground floors.
which explains why you might notice it so strongly in those underground supermarket parking garages you mentioned earlier.
Precisely, something the author notes they've observed pretty consistently since way back in 2007.
Okay, so the study uses a couple of specific hotel renovations as sort of case studies to show these problems in action. Let's talk about the first one, the Dinas Hotel in Luoyang.
Right, the Dinas Hotel. It had a major third-floor renovation back in 2023. Sounds comprehensive, new tiles, new plumbing, the works.
You think that would fix any issues?
You would think. Yet in the summer of 2024, so pretty recently after, the author still detected a strong sewer gas smell. In the hallway, in the room.
After a full renovation. So what was going on?
Well, to figure it out, they actually went as far as removing a toilet in one of these remodeled rooms to investigate the installation itself.
Okay.
And what they found was, well, a critical missing piece. There was no proper seal between the base of the toilet and the sewer pipe underneath.
No seal at all.
Well, they noted someone had tried to use a standard gasket, but it just wasn't thick enough. It couldn't create that necessary tight seal.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. Based on the source the article points out, that apparently there's no specific requirement in China's standards to use a flange on the sewer pipe for this type of toilet installation, the vertical outlet kind.
And this is a crucial detail, yeah. Think about how it's often done elsewhere, say in the US. Toilets are typically bolted down onto a flange.
Right, that metal or plastic ring.
Exactly. It's anchored securely to the pipe, and then usually a wax ring creates a really robust seal between the toilet base and that flange.
Makes sense.
And the flange doesn't just provide a sturdy connection point, it also helps center the toilet properly over the pipe opening.
Ah, so alignment is key too.
Definitely. The study's author actually observed one toilet in that Dunas hotel installed more than 5 centimeters off the pipe center. That's quite a misalignment.
Wow.
Now, while it might be theoretically possible to install without a flange, it requires extremely precise work to get the centering right and achieve a tight seal.
Which clearly isn't happening consistently.
Apparently not. The source suggests that maybe the training or just the adherence to best practice, even among licensed plumbers, seems insufficient.
So a missing or just inadequate seal, that's a direct pathway for sewer gas right into the living space. Simple as that.
Pretty much.
Okay, what about the other example from this study? The Anhui Tower Hotel in Beijing.
Right, the Anhui Tower. Similar story, in a way, underwent a complete remodel, including replacing all the plumbing fixtures.
Okay.
However, the study found that in the bathrooms, the shower and floor drains had these air valves installed instead of traditional water traps.
Air valves. Okay, how are those supposed to work? And why would they be a problem if they're being installed in a remodel?
Well, based on the article's explanation, these air valves are designed to open up and let air into the pipe when the pressure drops.
Okay, why?
It's meant to prevent siphonage, water being sucked out of a trap further down the line. They're supposed to close automatically afterwards to keep gas out.
Supposed to. I sense a but coming.
Yeah, there's a but. The authors argue and demonstrate that they just cannot provide full protection against sewer gas leakage, especially when you get pressure fluctuations in the sewer pipes.
Like when someone flushes a toilet nearby or drains a sink.
Exactly. The author even documented visible gas bubbles escaping from under a bag of water they placed over one of these drains while the nearby sink was draining.
You could see the gas bubbling out.
Yeah. And older air valves, as the source showed with pictures, they can corrode, get stuck open, offering basically no barrier at all.
So fundamentally, they're just not as reliable a barrier as a physical water seal. Is that the takeaway?
That's exactly it. A water trap or a siphon, that S-bend or P-bend pipe you see under the sink, it simply holds a small amount of water. That water creates a physical barrier. Gas from the sewer can't get past it into the room. Simple, effective.
And China's own standards. Do they require these traps?
They do. That's the thing. Their national standard, GB 500-0015-2019, it actually requires each plumbing fixture to have an appropriate trap. And it mandates floor drains with a minimum water seal depth of 50 millimeters in places like bathrooms and kitchens.
So the standards literally require proper water traps. But the study found places, even newly renovated ones, where they just weren't installed.
That appears to be the core issue this research is highlighting, yes. That shower drain pipe they observed in the Anhui Tower Hotel, it lacked a water trap built into the pipe structure itself, despite that standard requiring it.
Which forces reliance on those inadequate air valve inserts you mentioned.
Precisely. And similarly, going back to the toilets, the lack of a mandatory standard for using a flange with vertical outlet toilets seems to contribute significantly to these widespread improper sealing issues the study documented.
Okay, this raises a really important question that the study seems to grapple with. If these standards exist on paper, why isn't this stuff being caught and fixed? During construction, during renovation.
Right.
I mean, in many places, you have building codes actively enforced by local authorities. You have inspectors checking work at different stages. And plumbers are typically licensed. They have to pass tests showing they know what they're doing.
And that seems to be the key difference the study points to. While China has similar laws and national standards on paper, the enforcement and oversight structures, they appear insufficient in practice.
Oh, so?
Well, the ministry responsible develops the codes, but it doesn't seem to have direct oversight of how they're implemented on the ground. And crucially, for residential apartments, which are often sold as just bare concrete shells, basically. The owners then hire their own contractors for all the finishing work, including all the interior plumbing. And the study states that the government essentially doesn't enforce quality control on that specific interior plumbing installation work.
Okay, so a huge amount of the actual plumbing work being done when people are fitting out new apartments or doing major renovations is effectively unregulated in practice.
Yeah.
That sounds like a massive gap.
That looks like a significant gap identified by the authors, yes.
Huh?
The article even suggests that many people in China may have, perhaps over time, just become accustomed to the smell of sewer gas, something that, would likely trigger immediate complaints and demand remediation in other developed countries.
Right.
And even in professionally planned and operated buildings, like the supermarket garages we talked about, the problem persists, which suggests broader systemic issues beyond just individual homeowners hiring maybe dodgy contractors.
It really sounds like a perfect storm almost.
Yeah.
You've got potential technical understanding gaps among some workers, the lack of mandated use of critical components like flanges in certain common installations, and critically, a breakdown in the enforcement mechanism, especially for all that interior work where a huge amount of plumbing actually gets installed.
Yes, that sums it up well. The source concludes that despite having national standards, despite an aim to comply with international standards like ISO, the continued prevalence of these really basic plumbing deficiencies, it just underscores systemic gaps in implementation, in oversight.
So what were the study's recommendations then?
Pretty direct and clear, actually. Rigorously enforce the existing codes, mandate the use of critical components like flanges and proper water tracks where they're appropriate,
Makes sense.
enhance public awareness about the health risks associated with sewer gas. Maybe people don't realize how serious it can be.
Good point.
And establish mandatory training and certification for plumbing professionals, ideally adopting international best practices.
So putting this all together,
Yeah.
what does this really mean for, for the listener?
Well, I think it means that something as seemingly minor as a bad smell can actually be a clear indicator of quite serious underlying problems. Problems with foundational infrastructure that we rely on every single day for basic sanitation and public health. And it shows that the effectiveness of even well-intentioned standards, well, it ultimately hinges entirely on how they're practically implemented and overseen. At every single level, construction, renovation, major projects, down to individual apartment fit-outs.
This deep dive really brings that home, doesn't it? Just having comprehensive building standards written down somewhere isn't enough, not by a long shot. They have to be followed. They have to be enforced consistently.
Exactly.
We look at this pervasive issue of sewer gas leakage, particularly as documented in China by this study, driven by pretty basic things like missing water traps, toilets installed improperly without flanges, using these inadequate air valves, all apparently stemming from a breakdown in enforcement and maybe training, despite having codes already on the books.
And these aren't just, abstract technical details for engineers, are they? As the study in the International Journal of Construction Engineering makes very clear, they translate directly into tangible public health risks. From sewer gas exposure, respiratory issues, toxicity. It really shows that even in supposedly well-maintained or newly renovated buildings, really basic, decades-old principles of sanitation engineering are sometimes being missed.
It reveals just how crucial that often invisible infrastructure, like plumbing, really is for our daily well-being, and how the strength of any regulation is truly tested by its implementation, its oversight, right there on the ground.
It really does. This deep dive shows how easily something as fundamental as, clean air in our buildings can be compromised when these basic, long-established principles of sanitation engineering aren't followed.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how much we rely on standards being met, doesn't it? Even in the things we never see. What other hidden systems in our world might be impacting our well-being in a way that we don't even realize.